Hello, my name is Ben.
And my name's Josh.
Welcome back to FPL Graduates. Welcome back to another video where we're going to be looking ahead into Game Week 9 and we're going to be telling you some of the players that we potentially are looking to target in our teams, but also think you should target in yours too. Without further ado, let's get straight into it.
Okay, then, so we're going to go through a few defenders first and just do it in sort of positional order. So if you don't need any defenders this week, by all means skip on to the section that you do need some reinforcement in your FPL team. We're starting off with Ethan Pinnock, 4.5 million. Obviously, he's got back-to-back goals in game week 8 and 7, which is quite impressive. Brentford from set pieces have looked quite dangerous so far this season. Defensively, though, they have conceded a lot of XG so far this season, Ben. Do you think that's down to the fixtures, or do you think it's because they are genuinely not as defensively sound as we've seen in years gone by?
I think it's a bit of both, to be honest. I think the fixtures haven't been kind, but also they haven't looked as good defensively. I think Ethan Pinnock is a nice pickup at 4.5 million, regardless, just because the fixtures are quite decent for him. And at that price point as well, there aren't actually that many decent options available. So if you're looking around the market at this price point, then you can't really go wrong, especially with the fixtures that they've got coming up. A double up on Brentford with Mbumo could be sort of quite fruitful for you. So definitely one that I'd be considering. Yes, the expected goal against isn't too good, but you just have to look forward and can't expect attacking returns this week anyway, because 3 in a row is just unheard of for someone like him. Next up is another player playing for a team that haven't been that defensively sound so far this season. 13.9 expected goals against, playing in a very attacking role in his team. 5 big chance involvements for Ryan Nuri. And again, we're looking towards these fixtures when we're talking about him. Palace at home, Southampton at home in the next 3 is fantastic. 4 attacking returns already. He looks like really good value, but he is maybe overperforming just slightly on that data. Josh, what's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I definitely agree on that. I think he is overperforming a touch, but we have seen in the years gone by how fruitful his attacking play can be for owners. So for £4.4 million, I think even if you forget about the clean sheets, his attacking threat is worth that price alone. And I think going forwards now, we will see Wolves keep more clean sheets. They've had literally the worst start to the season in terms of fixtures. And they're coming out the back end of that now. Obviously, I thought against Manchester City, they played really well defensively. City created no big chances against them. They limited them to, I think, 0.8, 0.9 XG. So, yeah, really solid performance defensively there. Obviously, Gvardiol's going to score a banger, and then they've going to score from a set piece right at the death. So, for me, quite unlucky in that game not to get more. But I think, yeah, like Nuri in those fixtures going forwards. Okay, Brighton's not the best fixture, but after that, it's like a sea of green for the next maybe 10 game weeks, which will see you over that Christmas period where, transfers are going to be really, really crucial to hold on to. So bringing a guy like this in for that long period of time, perfect. Okay, then, so next up is a slightly more premium option in the defence, and it's Josko Gvardiol. Obviously, scored against Wolves, as I just mentioned, last game week. He's got 2 attacking returns already this season. One thing that shocked me when I heard it on Sunday is that Manchester City have only kept 1 clean sheet so far this season, and that was in game week 1 against Chelsea. So they are leaking goals pretty much every single game week. It's like the one against Wolves, like it could have been stopped at source, but they just seem to just concede that odd goal every week. For me, though, Gvardiol probably represents the best replacement for William Saliba if you do own him after his suspension. Obviously, Ben, you own Gvardiol. I'll let you talk his praises now.
Yeah, he's been fantastic in parts this season. Obviously, City have conceded more goals than we expected them to, and the data suggests they maybe should have sort of conceded a little bit less than they have, which is frustrating for owners. But look, we've seen this time and time again with so many defensive of decent teams. It takes a little while for those clean sheets to start coming in consistently. And I think with Guardiola and Manchester City, you can start expecting that to come a little bit more consistently as we go through the season. Obviously, with the sort of attacking wear and tear of other teams, that could sort of help City defensively. Obviously, a big miss being Rodri in that team, but Gvardiol does have attacking returns in him, and he has looked very good on the eye test, very advanced at points, playing almost as a left winger, which is fantastic to see. He's always going to present good value at 6 million, but you just got to be aware that there are other City players that are playing the same amount of minutes as him that are considerably cheaper. So if you're on a budget, you maybe would be tempted to look at those cheaper options in that City defence. Okay, so moving on into the midfielders, and the first person we're going to talk about is Dejan Kulusevski of Tottenham. He's looked in decent form as of late. He's got 3 attacking returns this season so far, 4 big chance involvements. He's looked very decent for Spurs, particularly over the last few weeks. Seems to be playing a bit more of a new role for Tottenham, and he seems to be thriving on it. And the fixtures for them look decent as well going forwards. I quite like him as an option at 6.2. He's a bit of a budget enabler. If you're looking to sort of move off those guys that are priced between 5.5 million that sort of aren't performing week in, week out, you could be looking towards Kulusevski as an option to replace them.
Yeah, definitely agree. I think it's a difficult situation though in that Spurs attack is in terms of who do you pick. Brennan Johnson's only what's that 0.4 more than Kulusevski, and I think it's quite close between them. Albeit Kulusevski outscoring him in game week 8. But yeah, I think overall that new role that you sort of mentioned, Ben, him going forward, he's almost playing more of a 10, and Maddison's playing that 8 role. Definitely suits him a lot more. So I think we could see those attacking returns increase. Especially with the nicer fixtures that Spurs have upcoming. Okay, then there's someone else at the same price, £6.2 million, is Alejandro Garnacho. He's coming off the back of a 10-point return against Brentford in game week 8. A decent performance from him. Obviously, Ben, you owned him earlier in the season. Missed so many big chances. Was on the bench a lot. He seems to be sort of getting those minutes behind him now, starting most weeks. I saw a stat today as well. I think when he started left wing in like those 500 minutes or something he's played there, he's pretty much got a goal every 60 minutes. So yeah, looking decent for him.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking decent at the moment. A frustrating own to start the season, but you could see that the returns were eventually going to come, and they have come, which is really good. I would be a little bit aware, just Manchester United in general, just because they haven't looked sort of very ruthless in front of goal. They've struggled in parts so far this season, and I do anticipate of the next 2 in particular, West Ham and at home to Chelsea, that could continue. Obviously, we could be proved wrong, but the fixtures sort of overall look decent for United. So again, if you're looking at a bit of a budget option and you're running out of sort of budget in that midfield, I think Garnacho provides good value. Okay, so a player that seemingly is a little bit overlooked with all the talk of the premium midfielders is Heung-min Son at just 6% owned. He's providing returns now sort of relatively consistently. 3 goals and 3 assists so far this season is nothing to sniff at. Few minutes played, I mean, he looks fantastic. 6 big chance involvements is good. He's looking like he's sort of turned a corner from his injury and is back to the Heung-min Son that we all know and love. At that price point as well, he presents decent value with those fixtures coming up for Spurs. Josh, is this Spurs asset the one to go to, or do the other players present a little bit better value at that cheaper price point?
I think that the main question of that comes down to who has penalties for Spurs. I'd say it probably would be Son at the moment, but we haven't seen them get a penalty since Solanke has joined. Obviously, Solanke has a ridiculously good penalty record from his time at Bournemouth. So if he's to keep penalties, I think he is definitely the go-to. If that sort of goes to Solanke, I think there's another question to be had there. Obviously, Solanke's not really been impressing owners. He's been dropping deep a lot, linking play, not really getting involved in big chances against the lower opposition in the league. Against the better opposition in the league, he does get those big chances. It's just the different ways that they play. For me, I think Son, like you say, is great value at 9.8 million. But when you look at the likes, if you could say you could have the likes of Saka, maybe even Palmer for $1 million more, and you know you're going to get the same minutes out of both of them, I think for me, I'd just edge it to those 2 guys. But at the moment, I think, Son's looking really solid, and with those fixtures coming up, I wouldn't be opposed to going to get him if you're, say, transferring out Saka this week with his injury crisis at the minute. Okay, then I'm going to move on to another premium that you might be replacing Bukayo Saka with this week, and it is Cole Palmer, as I previously mentioned. For me, this season, he's been super, super solid. Obviously, he has that massive 25-point haul, which sort of just looks weird in his overall performances so far this season, but I think that's what you're going to get with Cole Palmer. His ceiling is through the roof. He's got massive, massive potential to haul, and that's what makes him that sort of price point at 10.8 million. Definitely captaincy material if you're wanting to do that, probably a little bit later in the season. Arsenal at home definitely isn't a green fixture, so make sure you chalk that down as a red one. But overall, I think after that fixture, Chelsea's run gets a little bit easier, and I think, to be honest, Ben, those next 2 fixtures, Newcastle at home, United away, they're not the worst in the world from an attacking point of view, right?
No, they're not the worst, and you can see the reason why people have already started to bring in Cole Palmer, and his price is going to go quite a bit higher. We all know that, but I do think you can get away with not owning him for the next sort of 2 to 3 game weeks and bringing him in game week 12. I'm sort of looking at that at the moment. Yes, he might hurt you sort of in the short term, but if you can sort of get away with it and Salah produces or matches Cole Palmer's tally, then you're sort of looking to be in a relatively decent position. I thought he was a little bit unlucky not to get a return anyway against Liverpool away. He had a couple of decent opportunities there. So, yeah, I do think a big risk if you're going without him, particularly for those next 2 games. Okay, so moving on to the forward line, and we've got the most informed Norwegian striker in FPL at the moment. We have got Strand Larsen of Wolves at 5.5 million. Obviously, got that goal in game week 8 against Manchester City, a fairly well worked and taken goal by him. He looks fairly decent form at the moment, and Wolves' fixtures, like Josh said earlier, with Ryan Aït-Nouri, look very good. So I'd be sort of putting him on your radar for a cheap striker alternative. A lot of the cheap strikers this year, there's been a lot of hype and there's been a lot of failed picks. And, you know, if there's one to sort of jump onto now, it's probably Strand Larsen with the fixtures that Wolves have got coming up. So, yeah, decent amount of minutes and the potential of few attacking returns as well.
Yeah, 100%. I think for me, he's one of those like eighth attacker kind of players that you'd have on your bench, maybe rotate him in and out with someone else equally of that sort of similar price point, maybe Morgan Rogers. I think that, like you say, the price point is super cheap, so you can't complain too much there. This maybe could be targeted at those João Pedro owners who might need an escape route from him. Obviously, depending on his injury update this week, he's not looked too good in the weeks gone by so far. But yeah, 3 goals and an assist so far this season. You're just going to get what it says on the tin with him. He's not going to score 20 goals this season, but he will tick along and pick up those attack and returns nicely. Okay then, so someone who's a little bit more expensive than Strand Larsen is Yoane Wissa, and he's just returned from that injury that he sustained against Manchester City. He played 26 minutes against Manchester United at the weekend. No real impact in that game, but I think it's quite important for him to get those minutes back under his belt. He's come back from injury quite quickly compared to the initial timescale that we were given from Thomas Frank. But it's one to monitor because if you look at those fixtures, they are unbelievable. I think for me this week, he's one to watch because they do face Sheffield Wednesday in the Carabao Cup this week. If he gets some form of minutes there, obviously not the full 90 I wouldn't expect, but maybe like 45, 60 minutes, I'd be tempted to look at him for that Ipswich at home fixture because obviously that is the best one in the run that they've got coming up. Do you think it's too much of a risk, Ben, or would you think that the risk could be worth the reward if he gets that start?
Oh, I think the risk could be worth the reward if he gets to start because Ipswich, despite sort of looking decent at the start of the season, they've really sort of dropped off a little bit in terms of the optimism of the fan base and the level of performances, which I wasn't expecting that so early on in the season, which makes this fixture so much more appealing from an attacking point of view. And Visser, we've seen how good he's been particularly since Ivan Toney left, and he started the season on fire as well. So to see him back, I think if he's getting minutes last week, 30 minutes, I don't think he gets more than 30 minutes midweek. He could be on for a start come this weekend, which will be fantastic to see. And yeah, if you don't have Mbeumo in particular and you can't sort of facilitate a way of bringing him in your midfield, Visser up top sort of, like I said, like almost another good option for your 8th forward, which is really decent. And yeah, I have no sort of issue at all with maybe taking that risk as long as you don't have too many other issues in your team at the moment. Okay, and finally, we have got Raul Jimenez of Fulham, and since he has come into that starting 11 for Fulham, he's looked like the old Raul of Wolves. He's been fantastic, 4 goals and 1 assist. Maybe slightly overperforming in the stats, but you know what? A striker of that quality, we know he's got that quality, is always going to overperform a little bit. 8 big chance involvements as well is absolutely fantastic to see. And Fulham's fixture run looks very decent as well. They can be a bit hit and miss in attack, but we're hoping that Raul Jimenez can become maybe even sort of a talismanic figure in that Fulham attack.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing to point out as well is that Andreas Pereira obviously missed that penalty at the weekend against Aston Villa. So it does put the question in there that Raul Jimenez could take the penalties. Not for sure, but I definitely think there's more of a question mark there than there was before. So interesting as well to get a penalty taker at that price point. It's a no-brainer as it is. And with his output, I don't think he's blanked since he's come into the team. I think in game week 3. So yeah, he's been in unreal form. Potential penalty taker. It's a lot of green flags from Raul Jimenez, and I think out of the 3 that we've just discussed with Strand Larsen and Visser, if you're looking for some sustainable minutes, someone who's going to be reliable to play probably maybe every game week in your team, I think this is the guy to go for. Okay then, so that does wrap up our game week 9 transfer targets for this week. Let us know who you're going to be targeting in the comments down below.
Yeah, and as always, please remember to like, comment and subscribe to the FPL Graduates. I've been Ben.
I've been Josh.
And we'll see you guys
next time. Have a good game week, everyone.
So you may rise, but you'll never make me wanna stick around you.